The dawn slowly rose over the majestic valley of the Dragon Mountains. This time of day usually filled the savannah with a symphony of sounds, birds singing, the chirping of insects, the distant roar of animals, and the rustling of leaves in acacia canopies. But this morning, nature seemed to hold its breath. Jackson Hunter stood on the spacious veranda of his single-story home, built in traditional African style. A weathered wooden cup of hot coffee warmed his work-hardened hands. The 50-year-old game reserve ranger was a tall, sinewy man with a weather-beaten face and attentive gray eyes. Years of working in the wild had etched deep wrinkles on his face, and his dark hair was streaked with silver. Hunter slowly inhaled the morning air, trying to catch the familiar scents of the savannah. But instead of the familiar aroma of damp earth and blooming acacias, he sensed something else. Heavy, unsettling. His gaze swept across the horizon, where the silhouettes of the mountains were outlined against the pink sky. Usually, at this time, wildebeests began their journey to the watering hole, and the first vultures soared in the sky. Today, however, the plain seemed empty and lifeless. Having worked at the reserve for 20 years, Hunter had learned to trust his instincts. Every morning he performed this ritual. Standing on the veranda, observing the awakening African savanna, he knew every sound, every movement in this vast natural machine, and now all his senses were screaming of danger. Placing his unfinished coffee on the old wooden table, Hunter stepped off the veranda. His worn boots left imprints on the moist, dew-laden earth. His usual rifle stayed hanging on the wall. Something told him it wouldn't help today. The morning air was cool and humid, promising a hot day. The trail, beaten by years of walking, led through tall golden grass to an ancient baobab. This giant, having survived hundreds of droughts and rains, was the central point of this part of the reserve. Its mighty trunk, covered with wrinkled bark, was a witness to countless stories of the African savanna. At its base was a small depression, which gathered water during the rainy season, a favorite watering place for many animals. Approaching the baobab, Hunter noticed something unusual. The grass was trampled in an unusual way, creating winding furrows in the land. These weren't the tracks of wildebeests or zebras he was accustomed to. Something large and heavy had crawled here recently. Kneeling down, he ran his hand over the moist earth, feeling the deep furrows with his fingers. At that moment, his experienced gaze caught sight of a barely perceptible movement in the grass. Something cold and strong wrapped around his ankle at that moment. The muscles of the snake tightened with incredible force, like a steel cable. Before he could react, a second mamba swiftly attacked, coiling around his torso. Its scaly body was astoundingly powerful, every muscle working as part of a single mechanism. The third snake, the largest, wrapped around his chest and neck, gradually tightening its grip. Breathing became increasingly difficult. Each breath came with incredible effort, as if his chest was being squeezed by a vice. Black spots began dancing before his eyes, but his consciousness remained crystal clear. Hunter felt his body gradually numb from the lack of oxygen. At that moment he appeared, the black leopard, seemingly materializing out of the shadows of the savannah. His movements were fluid as water, yet full of unwavering strength. The predator's first attack was lightning fast. His claws sliced through the air and drove into the nearest mamba, forcing it to loosen its grip. The battle unfolded like a deadly dance. The leopard moved with incredible precision, each of his movements calculated and lethal. However, the snakes were formidable opponents too. They attacked synchronously, trying to reach him with their venomous fangs. Hunter, freed from two snakes, gasped for air, watching the fight. The leopard took several bites, but continued fighting with indomitable fury. His black coat glistened in the sunlight, muscles rolling beneath it like waves. When the last mamba was defeated, the leopard heavily collapsed onto the ground. The venom began to take effect, his breathing becoming intermittent. Overcoming the pain in his chest, Hunter rushed to his savior. With trembling hands, he took out his satellite phone and dialed the number for the reserve's veterinary service. Time seemed to stretch into infinity. Hunter sat beside the leopard, placing a hand on his powerful neck, feeling the slow pulse. The beast's eyes were half closed, but the spark of life still flickered in them. The sound of an approaching helicopter shattered the savannah's silence. The veterinary team acted swiftly and professionally. They administered an antidote, set up an IV, and loaded the leopard onto a stretcher. Hunter stayed by his side, continuously speaking in a calming voice. At the reserve's veterinary clinic, a true battle began to save the Black Warrior's life. The first hours after the attack were critical. The veterinarians worked tirelessly to stabilize the leopard's condition and determine the composition of the venom that had spread through his body. Every step in the treatment required caution and speed, as time was of the essence. Using a combination of antidotes and supportive medications, the veterinary team did everything possible to save the leopard. His vital signs were carefully monitored, and the veterinarians examined any changes, consulting with professionals experienced in treating wild animals. Hunter visited every day. He sat by the cage, softly conversing with the leopard. It seemed his presence and calm, reassuring voice affected the animal's condition. The veterinarians realized that the bond between the man and the beast had become part of the healing process. All efforts were justified when, on the fourth day, the leopard opened his eyes. It was the moment when hope turned into certainty. The animal had triumphed over death. His gaze was clear and strong, as before. He slowly rose to his feet, approached the bars, and looked directly at Hunter. In that gaze was not only the strength of a wild beast, but something more, a connection between two warriors who had gone through a deadly battle together. A week later, the leopard was released back into the savannah. Hunter stood and watched as the black shadow dissolved into the tall grass. Sometimes at night, he heard his roar in the distance, the proud and free voice of a predator who had become a legend of the reserve. Since then, he was called the Black Savior, and rangers told stories of the mysterious black leopard who appeared in the most difficult moments to protect those in trouble. Hunter cherished in his heart the memory of that battle, and the golden eyes that looked into his soul with understanding and nobility that transcended all human conceptions of wild animals. Did you enjoy this story? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to not miss new releases. See you soon.